Ghana, for a very good morning to you. Welcome back on the AM show. And you know, when you see me like this with my slides behind me, I'm going to be talking hard about matters crucial to our national life. It's time for my blunt thoughts, which I share with you this morning. And I've titled it, The Country with No Leaders and No Planning. Ghana stripped stark naked. The country with no leaders and no planning. Ghana stripped stark naked. Now, before you contest me, before you question the title to my blunt thoughts, reflect with me on what I'm about to say. I cast my mind back to the 1990s and the demonstrations that took place on the back of some taxes that many of us deemed unbearable. I lived through those times, so I know. And we had the Kumi Preko, Siemi Preko, Viemi Preko demonstrations. Isn't it curious that one of the people who led these demonstrations is now heaping so much suffering, taxes, levies, burdens on the backs of ordinary Ghanaians? Who would have imagined that Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo would lead us into this ditch? Who? Who would have thought of that? Even now, the football investors, as they call themselves, those who like to bet, are going to be taxed about 10% on their winnings. Interesting times indeed. Look, I have my own concerns about these betting entities and all of that. I have my own faith and what my understanding is of that, okay? All that is there. But young people are struggling to keep body and soul together in this country, to keep flesh on bone. And then if they go and get something little from, some gaming here and there, you want to tax that one too? How wicked can we be? I've just been contemplating this because I see a lot of young people. I was just sharing the other day that I see a lot of young people now walking around mumbling to themselves, saying things that no one understands. They're just talking to themselves. We're leading a lot of young people in this country into early crises, health crises. Especially for us men, the burden is high on us. And for some way, somehow, we must provide. But how do we do that in this economic time? You know what? I have a song for Akufo-Addo this morning. A song dedication. Ube kunya preko nane. Ube siye preko nane. Ube vieye preko nane. Those were the titles, the themes of those demonstrations in the 1990s. Kumi preko, siye preko, vieye preko. Yet you're doing that to us today. Look at our economic situation. Look at where we find ourselves. Recently, the Business Insider Africa, quoting from the East African, cited 5 countries that are in the doldrums when it comes to debt in Africa. They cite Egypt, Tunisia, Zambia, Malawi, and guess which country is at the apex of that list? Ghana. Now, we're going to struggle, even if we get that IMF deal, to bring our debt to GDP ratio from the almost 100% it is at to about 55%. That's going to be quite a gargantuan task, a Herculean task. But how did we get here? I'll be going through some of the slides shortly, and you'll see how reckless we've been and how we've ended up here. Again, I want to caution us Ghanaians, as these politicians come to you ahead of 2024, watch them carefully. They'll come and do so many things. They'll come and, cook banku with you, prepare banku, play cards with you, eat kokonte and pepper with you. All be lie. After all lie, be lie. Be so. So watch them. Because when they come promising, you must dig further below the surface and find out what really they have on offer. Because like we say, kasa yemframa, talk is mere air. Until you see them deliver. What didn't we see? We moved from taxation to production. We've moved even deeper, far deeper into taxation. That is where we find ourselves. And it is indeed pathetic as a country. I'll be addressing the West, the likes of America, Germany, the United Kingdom, among others, France and the rest, and part of their hypocrisy shortly. But let me get here. Just take a look at Ghana's $3 billion bailout package from the IMF and what our hopes are. Now, if you look at the steps the boxes we had to tick. The letter of intent was done. IMF staff assessment was done. You remember they came into the country, Stéphane Roudet. IMF staff report and approval. Domestic debt restructuring, which we had to force down the throats of ordinary Ghanaians to the point where even pensioners had to literally beg to be exempted. But then when it comes to external debt restructuring, that is ongoing, and that is quite a hurdle. And I'll be showing you why exactly, looking at the different sums involved. But what we need now, what has not been approved, what has not seen the light of day, the executive board approval, disbursements, that is the first tranche, and that is crucial, reviews and subsequent disbursements. Now let's go to the second slide. If we go to the next slide, you will see, look at that journey. Imagine Ghana is a car, and look at the loans we've contracted. Now, if you look at China alone, that's what we owe them, 1.7 billion, up to about 1.9 billion, 1.7 billion. The Paris Club, 1.9 billion. Others put together, 3.2 billion. The multilateral loans, we've contracted about 8 billion. And the Eurobond, where we've been shut out of, we can't even go into that market to borrow, 13 billion. And look at what we're looking for. Sum all of these, 13 plus 8, 21 plus 3.2, 24.2 plus... So 25.2, 25.9, 26.1, that will give you 27.1, and this would give you just about 28.45. I just did that very quickly. It wasn't planned. And look at how much we're expecting from the IMF. It's a drop in a bucket. It tells you that while we may use this to stabilize our system briefly, there is much more we should be looking at. If you look at what is in the pool of our external debt, and what we're going to get, and this 3 billion will not even come in like one tranche, bam, they give you 3 billion. That's not how it works. It could come in 500 million tranches. It could come in 1 billion like we've seen in other countries. And so before we get excited, let's think through our real core problems. Next slide. Now, it's also worthy of note, Ghana's project loans from China, because we've been borrowing thinking there's no tomorrow. Tomorrow has caught up with us. The year, if you look at 2019 and 2013, these years, and you look at the amounts we've been contracting. So in 2013, $150 million oil exports in terms of Integrated National Security Communications Enhancement Network, the Alpha project as it was called. Again, 2013, 850 million oil exports from the Western Corridor. We harness our resources to these loans. Then 2019, 211 million oil exports, Accra Intelligent Traffic Management System and road completion. And again, it's questionable what we use some of these sums of money for. And then 186 million in terms of oil exports. Again, we tie our resources to these loans. And sometimes we have nothing to show for them. Look at some of these projects. Fishing landing sites project. Today, the fishermen are still weeping. Let's go to the next slide. And that is how we've ended up here. But even as we talk about, we'll get this loan, we'll get that loan, I was making the point earlier this morning. Egypt got its agreement in December last year. The release of funds has not even happened yet. You see why we should hasten slowly all this talk about May and all of that? Because we've been setting timelines, giving timelines, and we've failed with each one of them. The IMF has to tick certain boxes. Unless we've ticked them completely, will not get even the tranches of money that we are looking for. Now, Zambia will have access to about $188 million. The first tranche out of a total package of $1.3 billion. You see how much they are getting? For starters, in financing, once the review is approved by the IMF management and formally completed by the IMF Executive Board. To remove any hurdles to the timely completion of the review, Zambia needs its official creditors to move forward and reach an agreement on a debt treatment in line with the financing assurances they provided in July 2022. So that's the catch, Ghana, for that last line. The only way forward is to reach an agreement on a debt treatment in line with their own financing assurances that they provided in July 2022 and will be held to the same benchmarks. Let's go to the next slide. Now, when I talk about tying our resources to loans and then not using those loans in a worthy manner that works for generations to come, and how wicked and insensitive our leaders are, this is what I mean. Consider the small country, small in population, Norway. Here's what they're doing. Their population is just 5.4 million, about a sixth of our population. But look at this. Look at their GDP. $482.2 billion. That's more than 5-6 times our GDP. Our GDP hovers around 70 billion, right? Look at their GDP. Many, many times more. Ours. And their GDP per capita, $75,000 per capita. Let's go to the next slide. Now, since 1990, they've done something interesting, which I'm proffering to our leaders today. Instead of thinking of the here and now, instead of thinking of self-aggrandizement, instead of thinking of lining their pockets, instead of consuming not just the fruit, but the seeds and the tree as well that produces the fruit. Because that's what our leaders are doing. They consume everything. Look at our gold. It's not going to last forever. But if you look at projections, how much we have left, by 2050 thereabouts, we could be in dire straits. The oil is going to be here for a finite period of time. Now, Norway in 1990 created the Government Pension Fund Global. It was originally the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, and it was to create wealth for, think about it, future generations, not even the current generation, future generations since 1990. Now, the fund rakes in savings from oil revenue, which Norway is also big on. I'm citing this because we too have oil revenue, yet we dig into it and expend it uselessly. From oil revenue, it's among the world's wealthiest funds. And guess what? $1.3 trillion is what we're looking at. $1.3 trillion. Think about it. If we had something like that, we probably wouldn't be going to the IMF. But because we are bereft of thinking, that's why I'm saying that we have no leaders and we have no planning. We don't. If you have proper leadership, will we be where we are? If we planned, would we be where we are? Let's go to the next slide. I also want to talk about the UK red listing Ghanaian health workers. And apparently, you see, here's the good thing about these international outfits. They also monitor the levels when it comes to nurses leaving certain parts of the world. And so the UK has put Ghana's or Ghanaian nurses on ice, the transfer of Ghanaian nurses to the UK on ice. We all know that. Let's go to the next slide for more information. Now, the countries listed have a universal health coverage index that is lower than 50, okay? And once that is noted, it triggers something. So the density of doctors, nurses, and midwives are below the global median of 48.6 per 10,000 population, meaning one health worker in Ghana takes care of about 206 people. And that was part of why this was triggered. Let's go to the next slide. Now, in 2021, the UK took similar action against 46 countries, of which Ghana was included. And what happened? That was what we just made mention of to you. Let's move to the next slide. Just in the first quarter, ignore the bit about, the other bits. In the first quarter alone of 2022, nurses that left Ghana to seek better conditions of service abroad numbered 3,000. 3,000. It has become so dire that now the Director General of the Ghana Health Service has come out to say, you know what? We have to come up with a plan to stem the tide of this, outflow of nurses, else it could impact healthcare delivery. That's how bad it has become. But what have we done? They work brutal hours. We pay them a pittance. Who wouldn't move out? If you don't incentivize it, who would stay? Especially when your inflation and your economy is what it is. Take note of this. The track record, exporting nurses. And we have exported to so many countries. We don't have data on all of them, but the reality is that we have for some countries. In Barbados, we've sent over 400. That was in 2019, if you recall. In Germany, we sent 3,000. In fact, it wasn't an option. They left the country in 2019. Japan, USA, Canada, in fact, Australia as well. We know droves go to those countries as well. We just don't have specific data for them, and that's why we've left the blanks there. But if you look at the thousands that are going out every year, no one will tell you that we have a crisis on our hands. It's not just the vaccines. We have a crisis on our hands. Next slide. And of course, this one If you think about it deeply, you will realize that we're in a big hole. There are more Ghanaian nurses in the NHS, the National Health Service, in the UK than in Ghana. Think about it. There are more of them outside Ghana than there are in Ghana. The question is why? We all know why. We know why. But we are sitting, waiting for something to happen. And this is where to conclude my thoughts. I also want to call out the hypocrisy of some of these Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, among others, and some of these countries that will come and wax lyrical and try to be politically correct. The US will come, oh, and Ghana is this. Beacon of democracy, it's more like beacon of democracy, not democracy. What we see here, why did they cite us recently in that report? And Oliver Bakavomo and some of the things we have done here to different people in this country. Why did they cite us? It makes no sense where we are. And it goes back to the point I was making, that if you don't have leaders, then obviously you have misleaders. If you don't have proper planning, then of course you cannot claim to have a plan. That is why I titled my blunt thoughts what I did this morning. So to the West, especially, come off your high horses and be honest with our leaders. Tell them the truth. Stop telling us, oh, and Ghana was doing so well, it's only because of COVID-19 and the Russo-Ukrainian war. We all know better. We read. We know far better than that. Let's be honest. When John Benjamin was in the country, he was saying certain things that the former administration did not like, but a lot of it was true. The V8s and the rest, it was true. Mr. Stricker, the Dutch ambassador, who has now left the country, when he spoke about Ghana, not just beyond aid, but beyond corruption, he was speaking the truth. That is what we need. When recently, the German ambassador, Daniel Krul, spoke about the fact that we have more ministers than his country, yet we're coming to beg from his country, it was the truth. Mr. President went to SONA and castigated diplomats for that, but it was the stark truth. We're stark naked as a country. And you know what happens? We're exposed to the rape, the ravaging of the entirety of the world. And other countries will take advantage of us because we're not clothed with all the resources and everything we have. We have been stripped naked because we don't have leaders and we don't have planning. It is high time, all of us, from the one born today, the one yet unborn, we fight for them and we call for better leadership from our misleaders. They may not like it as I say it, but I'll say it as it is and continue to do so. My name is Benjamin Akakbo. These are my blunt thoughts shared with you, raw, hot, unedited, undiluted. God bless Ghana and make her truly great and strong.